no one can
Yep.
people can't buy. That's probably a good sign, to be honest. Like I don't know.
That,
It's like
that always happens, man. It's always
yeah, yeah,
Coinbase.
yeah, right. Yeah, it was like
And
trending almost.
it's always Bitcoin that breaks Coinbase too.
Yeah,
They
nothing
they,
else. Yeah,
they can never
like
handle Bitcoin.
yeah, that should tell him something. But hey,
What is up, guys? I am here with Laolu, the CTO of Lightning Labs. Super excited to have him on here. Lightning Labs has been pumping out a ton of new products over the last 6 months, really, but this is one of the guys who is leading the helm there. Laolu is here to answer any and all of your questions about Lightning, about Bitcoin, about himself. Whatever he feels comfortable with, we're gonna try to push the buttons here. So
all right, let's
this
go
is an
in.
AMA on Bitcoin Magazine, and yeah, I mean, let's just get started. Like before we got on here, we were talking about Lightning or Bitcoin is mooning. How are you feeling about this price action? Our institutions here. Yeah, what do you have to say?
I don't know. I guess I've never like one to kind of like lash into like a narrative or kind of like a post hoc like rationalization of like why it's moving, but it's moving. And, it seems to be like fairly organic as well. Like this is effectively in my opinion like kind of like the all time high, and like 20K lasted like an hour. Realistically, right? So this is like
Yeah,
basically.
seriously.
So at this point, everyone is up. And that's a positive thing, I guess. So yeah, well, I guess we'll see where we go. People have like crazy targets through the end of the year in like 2021, but it's going up, and that's a fact. So we'll see what happens from here.
Um, do you have crazy targets? Like, do you think about price?
I guess not usually as much. I kind of like understand like fundamentals basically, and like like I'm been doing this for 5 years or so now. Like I don't see a reason to do anything else. It's like the dopest thing I can be working on right now, in my opinion. So I just think it's it has it has a particular curve that's going to the up and to the right. I guess we'll see exactly where that ends. But yeah, it's nice.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's nice. That's a very casual way to say it.
Yeah.
So I
The main
mean,
thing is yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
no, no. You were saying the main thing is,
Oh wait, no. I said I'm more after like a PS5 right now than like the price tag. Like, and people saw my tweet thing. Help me go in and stock. That'd be dope. Little shout on the side.
yo, if you have a PS5, holler at Laolu. So you said that this is the coolest thing that you could be working on right now. You've committed the last 5 years of your life to Bitcoin.
hmm
I've committed close to the last 3.5 for me. So that's a lot of time kind of like going down the rabbit hole and contributing. What drives you about Bitcoin?
Really good question. Yeah, I guess it's kind of like a thing where it's like I feel like this is like one of the most impactful things like we're doing right now, like in the world in general. Because like obviously like we could Tupper could be working to like make ads better or like make page make Facebook like load like treat those things more quickly than ever else. But to me like those really aren't something that like I'll really be proud of at the end of the day. Where I feel like right now like also just like the communities are amazing. I kind of like really have like a pretty like broad impact. We interact with me all the time on like Slack, on Twitter, and things like that. I also love how like engaging like our own users are. Like they give us a lot of really good feedback as well. So it's like just exciting every day, like new things happening. So I think it's kind of like one of those things where it's like directionally, it just like I think it's gonna have like massive impact on the world already. I think we're seeing kind of things speed up a little bit more like in like the end of this decade, and also going to the next one as well too. So yeah, I think it's kind of like a main thing of like just actually like having an impact on the world itself. Also like really cool direction in itself, like as far as like CES, kind of like the whole like economics parts of it, just kind of like coordination in general too. So I think it has like intersects so many interesting problems that start to like go out over time, like kind of like broaden my my own interest as well too over time. So yeah, there's nothing else I'd be working on myself like. So other than like I don't know, I'd be like a jazz musician or something. But this is in the current timeline. I work on this.
So do you play an instrument? Did you ever dabble in jazz?
Yes, I did in the past. Like, I used to play saxophone a bunch. Basically, I was kind of inspired by like Fela Kuti, if you know who that is. Like, people call him kind of like the original Black Pleasant. Kind of like did a bunch of things in Nigeria, like the 70s or so, like Afrobeat things like that as well. But yeah, I'm trying to pick it up again. And like the whole quarantine, just I'm in my room, might as well like try to like bust something out. So I might have an album coming out soon. I might have a jazz album. We'll see. We'll see. 2020, actually, like I think 2023 is a target for that. So I need a few more years of practice coming up. But then we'll see what I can make.
Wow, man of many talents. It never ceases to amaze me how many just how many polymaths there are in Bitcoin. And maybe,
Hmm.
you take that as a huge compliment, but definitely I know a lot of people look up to you, and the fact that on top of what you're doing in Lightning, you might drop a saxophone album is pretty badass. I have to
Yeah. Yes.
say, I will be disappointed if you accept anything other than Lightning for the
For
album.
the
So
album. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
It's got to be streamed. Yeah, like definitely got to be streamed.
I have high expectations. So, I mean, let's start talking about Lightning. Why
Sure.
don't you tell us about, what these products that you guys have shipped, this year, and kind of the vision around how all these things are going to work together.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, so one thing we shipped kind of like in the beginning of the year was like something we call Lightning Terminal or like LitD. And this is effectively kind of like a way to like package like a bunch of our products that are kind of like deal with kind of like liquidity management, also kind of like generally management we do in general as well too. So what the first thing like Lit, or it's also called LitD as well. Like one thing it has is basically has like pool in it. One of the cool thing about like LitD and Terminal in general is like it's basically also kind of like a packaging solution that we package basically LND, Loop itself, Pool now, Faraday, a bunch of other things as well too. So it's kind of like a single binary you can basically launch on like on your computer or your server else, maybe you can bind everything together. Because for example, otherwise maybe you have to like manage like 3 or 4 containers. This you basically have like one binary. And one of the cool things is like anytime we release like LND or a loop or pool or whatever else, you basically update one single binary and have everything else be there as well too, right? So one of the things that like we're getting into for terminals kind of like just make it a little bit easier for people to use loop in general. So kind of like show you different kind of like better ways to visualize it, what's going on, the timeline, things like that. Also kind of like a certain like more advanced features like kind of like picking like which channels like to loop out. Like one thing we have coming out as well pretty here pretty soon as well, something called like auto loop, which basically lets you kind of like schedule loops to be executed in the future. So rather than like you kind of like hitting the buttons like loop every like time and like Friday night or whatever else, basically like a fee rate or whatever else, and like then it's gonna kind of like optimally like loop for you on the background, basically like adding more and more automation to what's going on there. That was like terminal itself. But the other thing we have as well, we recently dropped something called Lightning Pool, and basically the pool is basically like a way to kind of like solve the amount of liquidity in a sense, to basically allow individuals to like acquire the amount of liquidity for their own needs, but they also actually even do like outbound as well, depending on what's going on. But that's kind of really cool thing. It's basically kind of like an auction runs every 10 minutes and let people kind of like buy and sell channels. And like I guess one like higher level effect of that too, but you kind of like have like the concept of now kind of like Bitcoin native yield as well. So kind of like the yield is in like a non-custodial way, in a way that's also kind of like a lot more directly kind of like like verifiable. Like you're getting yield because someone else basically needs to receive money over Lightning, rather than like some like very convoluted series of like flash orders or whatever else that along with it too. So those are two like the things I kind of like the peripheral that pretty excited about this year. Beyond even all the protocol and L&D things and things going on in the background as well. So there's things I can go care about right now at least.
Okay. So a lot of stuff there. Of course, in the chat we got the typical slow down dude. So just want to throw that in your direction. But
Oh, should I be looking at
uh,
the YouTube chat? So are there questions
I
there
mean,
or?
well, I'll be curating through that, so you don't have to
Okay,
worry
for sure.
about it. But
Okay, no problem.
yeah, absolutely. Nothing new for you on that front. Just to kind of summarize, in general, it sounds like, obviously Lightning Terminal and Loop is this way
Hmm.
to visualize and manage, working with Lightning Network. And then
Hmm.
Lightning Pool is a way to buy and sell liquidity and effectively establish kind of like this risk-free rate for Bitcoin, or this rate for Bitcoin. Is
Hmm.
that correct? Did I summarize that in kind of layman's
Uh,
terms?
yeah, no, yeah, definitely correct. I guess the one thing I want to get across is also kind of like LitD as kind of like, or also Terminal is kind of like a packaging solution, and that basically like it's going to package like everything we're working on, Lightning Labs as a company in general. But I think before we had some issues where like, or not issues, maybe like some kind of like it was a little bit harder to get everything else up because you basically had to have LND and then Loop and then Faraday and everything like all beside it itself. Now you can like allow you to put that all together into one package. The cool thing about that is like, everything's like native Go, so you can cross compile it any other thing. And people are packaging more and more now as well too. And it's going to kind of grow into a little more like kind of like a general like liquidity management solution focused kind of like operation of like your node itself, recommendations as far as like how to get it better. We're trying to focusing on that aspect to make sure we have like a very like solid backbone in the network itself. Because otherwise, if the backbone isn't solid, we wouldn't be able to even like accommodate like new users or use cases or whatever else. Trying to make sure like that's always like super solid. Making sure the right node operators have what they need, and also people at the edges as well, like exchanges, merchants, be able to kind of like ensure they can receive effectively, which is where things like Loop and also general channel management coming in on that point too. And another thing we're doing as well, like the LND side, so like just generally always making LND better, like more secure, more robust, more fast, more nimble. One thing we've been doing a lot of kind of like testing against like larger nodes in general. It's like one thing that initially like, okay, well people would tell like, oh, I have like million invoices in my node. Like, oh, okay, dude, that's a lot of invoices. Now obviously like I think we're kind of like pushing that scale now in general because people have nodes are live for maybe like almost like 2 years at this point now. So we're kind of like really optimizing for like nodes at a larger scale, like more your professional environments. Make sure they have better security, moving startup time, memory use, all things like that as well. So LND should get even like leaner as we're going along to basically accommodate all the like new scale we're seeing because like people are actually reporting to us they're hitting like skill limits, which is a good thing in general. Like Lightning's growing, we need to make sure LND keeps up with that as well. So we're doing a lot of work into like optimizing, profiling, fuzzing, working on security in general as well. So getting that people are putting large amounts of money into the system as right now.
That's awesome to hear about like the upcoming scale. And yeah, absolutely. You're kind of addressing the difficulty of managing Lightning, like a Lightning node and managing liquidity and all that kind of stuff, and trying to make sure that it's like a robust foundation. So that's
Exactly.
awesome. I want to talk more about Lightning pools, but we do have a bunch of questions in here. Brad is just asking, is there an area that you'd point newbies to learn more about running Lightning Network daemon? And someone else is asking maybe if there's an area that you can just point them to learn about debugging their node? Like, are there
Mhm.
resources like that for newbies that you think would be interesting?
Really good question. So I think right now we have a bunch of docs, but for example, I think right now they're kind of like shooting across a few different places. Like for example, there's LND, the actual like docs folder in LND, there's like a level in the computer, whatever else. But I guess like kind of like broader, we're working on also kind of like basically centralizing all of our documentation, basically one location. So like we have a bunch of people doing work on the team on that right now. So ideally that comes out in like the next month or so. Like the first question about like running a node in general. So people go to like LND, like the actual GitHub repo itself, and like they look at I guess safety.md. There's a bunch of like docs I think a little bit more like aren't really recognized that much. It kind of like gives you a bunch of like tips about running a node safely as far as what's going on. So the question was like learning more about pool or
It it was more about learning more about debugging their node. It sounds like they're having some errors.
good question. I think Carla actually has this like guide. Maybe that's like an internal thing. Um, no, that's super good. I just probably tell them like, oh wait, no, here it is. There's something called debugging underscore LND in our docs folder again, which I guess is not really very accessible. So we're trying to make sure all the stuff's a lot more accessible on kind of like a higher level, maybe like kind of like a site that we're gonna have everything concentrated on. But yeah, so this tells you basically how like you're looking at debugging for LND. But logging, another really cool thing is basically preprop and LND. Basically, let's see kind of like memory usage, go routines, performance, things like that as well. So typically, like we get people be like, hey, can you give us a profile? Profile we can kind of get to the problem with like what's going on their end. But yeah, so debugging LND dot markdown and the docs folder in the LND repo has both those resources.
Okay. Maybe I'll have to collect that from you after this and throw it into the
Mm-hmm.
show notes. But
Oh, for
check
sure.
out those resources, guys, and keep the questions coming. Um, so another good question here before we jump back into pools is Brian Harrington is asking, what are your thoughts about the whole Uncle Jim concept? And I guess really quick, are you familiar with this idea of Uncle Jimming?
Uncle
No?
Jim? I
Okay.
don't know. It
So
sounds like a particular term, though. You know what I mean? Go
yeah,
ahead. Like,
yeah. Wait, so let's take a step back. But
Uncle Jim.
Matt
Yeah.
Odell kind of coined this, right? And he just
Uh
like,
huh.
you want to be your Uncle Jim, you got the node, and you're gonna help out all your homies and
Uh
get
huh.
them like connected to your node, so that way they can get into like a mixer or get onto Lightning without having to like trust a third party. They can trust their Uncle Jim, right? So I guess
Okay.
it's like
Okay.
this idea around neighborhood banking, banking that is
Ah.
enabled by the people. We're seeing like with Lightning now, like you guys are making it easier than ever, and there's UIs that are making it easier than ever to host custodial Lightning wallets for other people
Mhm.
and things like that.
Mhm.
I guess how do
Mhm.
you feel about Lightning enabling other people to provide liquidity as a business and provide these kind of like services,
Mhm.
channels, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I definitely think it's really cool. And I think one of the things that works, like, that's why pool is pretty cool in general, because like pool also kind of like less people like running hours also effectively kind of like, smooth out their like revenue. So you can basically think of it similar also kind of like a mining pool. And that, like, before this, people could basically only like, earn like, routing fees basically whenever transfer actually happening on their routing node itself. That could be, very sporadic. It could be like maybe like Tuesday night, you have a bunch of transfer, maybe like Wednesday, nothing going on there. But like pool kind of like also like lets you kind of have like a non-speculative, like non-probabilistic part of like their revenue, which is basically just like what they're earning on leases in general. But I think it's definitely, really cool people to kind of like, set light know themselves, be a little more like self-sovereign on their own end, and also kind of like like take back control as far as like what they're doing, hosting their own things like that as well too. And like, I guess one thing, like it seems like we have like a really big community. Like for example, like there's like the Raspberry Pi Bliss people, you can get your nodes set up pretty quickly, kind of like on fairly modest hardware as well too. I think that's a really cool thing in general, like the trend going on forward. I think the other thing is like for you to realize at time that like Lightning node itself can exist, but like maybe you need to kind of like have a little more like passive, not passive, more like active kind of like monitoring of your node itself to make sure like at least right now it's fairly active. We want to make it like more passive in the future to make sure like it's fairly connected, has a good liquidity, channels are like very live, things like that as well too. So that's like the first step. But then there will also, I think, the short term still be kind of like this like skill curve as far as like people like setting themselves apart to like manage a little more actively. But no, I hadn't heard about this Uncle Jim thing. I feel like they should have another like name for that for something. I don't know. Maybe they should test it in some more demographics, perhaps. Like, but yeah.
Yes, in hindsight, this is ringing true to me.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I feel you on that. Okay, well, you kind of touched about pools a little bit in that
Mm-hmm,
explanation, talking about like the free banking that's enabled through Lightning.
mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm.
like talk about why is this pools product so important? Why is finding trustless Bitcoin interest rates and other kind of fundamental measures like that so important, and how does Lightning pools enable that?
Cool. Yeah, so I'll kind of start from maybe from the beginning. So I had the idea maybe like 3 years or so ago. So like it's actually like a fairly like old thing in the company. People that have been in the company for a while like really know about it. Like, and we also kept it under wraps for a long time, which is pretty good. So it's kind of like one of those ideas that like it took a while to kind of marinate. But at least I had the idea, and it's been like work more on the architecture. I had like an internal paper before the actual paper externally that came out itself. I think one of the fundamental things we're trying to solve is basically trying to like just what we call like the amount liquidity issue, which is also kind of fundamental like a bootstrapping issue, Lightning itself. So like like I'm doing the network itself. How do I actually get new channels in? Number one, maybe I can actually open a channel myself. And that requires me to have like my own capital to actually receive when I need to. Because at the same time, me opening a channel, I can only receive up to that amount that I want to that I actually want to open up. So like I can open like $10,000 channel, I can get like $10,000 in referrals. You can then maybe even have someone else open a channel to you, but then at that point it's like okay, that's more of like an outsourced thing. While they really do that, they also have like kind of like their own cost of capital. They have like closing fees, things like that as well. So like they would do that maybe for like you really homie. Then obviously we have other things like Lightning Loop as well, which can help you basically open a channel and then like loop out to yourself. And that maybe take a little bit longer because you have to do like several different loops. And also like at that point, you're not getting like the true leverage in a sense as far as like what you get with Pool. Basically, Pool itself, like it solves a number of things. The more basically the amount of liquidity problem. Basically, like how can I do the Lightning network and actually be able to receive funds instantly? Another thing we have as well, like before we because Lightning in itself only has single funder in the beginning, like you can only actually like get open channels up to another individual. So therefore, like many different nodes, I'll start kind of like it started it in kind of like an unbalanced state to begin with. When you're in an unbalanced state, that means you can actually receive some money to yourself, right? So many different nodes only have they don't really have any boundary at all, and that kind of also makes the routing a little worse because they're already able to route what's going on. And another thing as well, it also kind of like general like bootstrapping for different like users to Lightning itself. One thing Pool offers something we call a sacred channel, basically the ability to say how kind of like Alice back a channel for Carol and like Carol's getting on or the first time it'd be your Bob. So that's kind of like an overview like what Pool tries to solve in general, for Lightning itself. I think it has a bunch of like really cool kind of like higher order effects. For example, like the whole interest rate thing itself, like the whole yield curves, other kind of like an analysis as far as like is Lightning growing or not, like de-risking routing nodes themselves, giving people like, a lot more quality control of like how they actually manage their inbound. Has a bunch of other cool traits. But I think fundamentally basically like solving inbound liquidity itself. I think from that there results in a bunch of other like high level effects. So basically the answer like like how are you earning yield on like Pool itself is basically you're earning yield because someone else needs kind of like infrastructure to basically connect themselves to the network itself, right? So it's almost the ability to kind of like either like build like a road or maybe like even like a fiber cable on demand. Like so you choose analogy basically because otherwise like it'd be like for that obviously take much like time and energy, physical resources or whatever else. And this could be have like virtual tubes of money. This could be about allocating those tubes of money in an efficient manner in the network itself. At least one thing I want to say about that is like I feel like we kind of had like few different stages. I think we have like had a stage like where like someone like LND came across and like put down like what was like $200 or $300 Bitcoin, 200 or 300 Bitcoin networks up. I think one thing is like I think I kind of like shows like a very like type of example of kind of like what I would call like economic inefficiency in the network itself because like they put out a bunch of money, but they were really very targeted as far as like where they open the channels to, right? Like we're seeing on Twitter basic edition like right now maybe they're losing money because of the closing fees because like the closing so many channels that were all necessarily useless as well too, right? So like, you can imagine if someone like Pool existed by the time like LND came on initially, they were probably allocated like a much smaller amount of liquidity network itself, but they've actually been a lot more effective on there. And as far as like earning revenue for their own sources, and they're also actually providing their better quality of service, right? So Pool kind of like they give the ability to like know exactly where channels to be allocated to, like using what are called like market signals. So you can basically see the price of where a channel is allocated, and like you basically have them do that for you automatically, versus you trying to like really pick exactly where they should be opening channels to.
Yeah. So again, automation, ease of use, coordinating liquidity, all those kind of things to make it easier. Laolu, sorry to bother with you again. Some folks are complaining that's a little hard to hear you. Maybe you could try to speak up a little bit and speak a little bit slower.
Okay,
But
sure.
ultimately, you're dropping a lot of great knowledge here, and
Okay,
it makes
I'll
a
try
lot
to
of
run.
sense. So I guess talking about like where the network is going, right? You kind of teased that the network is kind of getting ready for bigger scale, a lot more value coming on board. We're seeing Bitcoin on the base layer teasing higher fees, and a lot of people are predicting that that's going to create more demand for Lightning. Where do you see the Lightning network going? And yeah, I guess we can go from there.
Yeah, no, really good question. Yeah, so I think I think we kind of entered a phase where like at this point we're trying to like signal a little bit more from like readiness of the network itself. For example, we have the whole 1 limit, which is lifted in the past. Basically, a lot of people kind of like have like a larger channel in general. Right? And I think one thing is like with that, like I think it's really good for many people because like for example, like now they basically have like less sort of closing costs, even opening costs. Like for example, you can open like 100 channels, of like 0.1 BTC basically, or you can open like a few of like 10 BTC, right? At that point, so already kind of like consolidate like what you have to like spend on chain fees in the future as well too. I think that's another interesting thing. Whereas right now, like I guess going back to chain fees, like one thing we're working on right now on like Lightning is called something called like anchor outputs or anchor coordinates itself. Basically, lets you kind of like not have to like guess what the chain fee will be. For example, let's say like right now, like the chain fees are pretty low, but maybe like 1 to 38 hours, and then things really like clever over the weekend. I want to force on the weekend. I like to be unable to do so because maybe my chain fee would be too low, right? So basically, right now, Lightning, you basically effectively guess what chain fees will be ahead of time, which is difficult. And then we have like spikes with like typically those spikes correlated with the actual Bitcoin price itself. So one thing what anchor outputs let you do, they basically let you kind of set like what you think is like a fairly like same level, maybe like 5 to 20 or whatever else. Then in the future, actually bump your fee if you need to when you get into the chain. So overall, this should like dramatically lower the cost of like forced closing or even co-op closing generally for the network as a whole. Basically, it's really good because now people can kind of like have like lower costs of like getting on and off of Lightning itself, and that's where like typically most main costs are right now in the networks as is right now. But I think nothing about the chain fees. Like I guess there's a thing where like if people are afraid of chain fees, then get your channels open now. I guess, and there's an easy way. This new cool auction, you may get channels effectively like in 10 minutes or so that get the network itself. I think it's something that would definitely help what's going on there. I think in general we're seeing a lot of really cool activity. For example, people are getting doing more stuff on the gaming end. We're seeing like places like Fold and like Strike really starts to like get a lot more traffic themselves for people like buying and selling Bitcoin. We're seeing exchanges more changes getting online as well too. I think it's kind of a thing where like my main thing is I'll try to ensure like we're ready for whatever adoption is coming around the corner itself. I'll try to make sure we're coming ahead of that curve. Seems like right now we're in a fairly good place. Obviously, we have a bunch of other things coming along that could even like really like enhance what we can do in general with Lightning itself. For example, like like Taproot and other things going on with that. And I think also shadow change in general, like it's something we created to kind of like build like the CLM on top of general, which has other kind of like other potential I think in terms of like smart contract of Bitcoin going forward.
So I guess kind of talking about the actual network itself, what's your opinion of like the network topology? I would say that that's probably one of the things that like Lightning downstairs and critics have like been pushing against is that the network is going to have spokes and or hubs and spokes.
Yeah.
That is going to be centralized. That
Mm-hmm.
we're going to see a lot of custodial Lightning usage. I would say based on kind of anecdotal, I see a little bit of both, but
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't see the network as being compromised in any way, even with its current set of properties. So I guess I'm kind of curious, what are you seeing? Obviously, you're a lot more intimate, and is it what you expected? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
let's just go from
Mm-hmm.
there.
Yeah, really good question. So I guess like my thing is as long as I was making kind of like a skill free topology in terms of like actually like the top nodes being able to reach out the other ones and people kind of like having to be more resilient. So I guess I worry more about kind of like resilience of the network itself. So I guess in my opinion like the whole kind of like hub and spoke thing wasn't really super worried about because like, my thing is was like if you can actually have like a very low barrier to entry in the network itself, basically you can join the network pretty easily themselves. I think that's fine. For example, like if someone that had like a you have to be my friend to be connected to whatever else, they kind of like have their own like sub network itself. That's fine as well too. Well, okay, I'm not going to join your network, but I think as long as people like join the network relatively low ease, and that means you have a computer, internet, and Bitcoin. As long as you have those three things, you can join the network. So I think that's still success right now. That's fine. I guess one other thing as far as hub and spoke, I guess the main reason people at least I was sure for them in the past was kind of like for perspective like resiliency, like it takes like 1 or 2 nodes going down, the entire network stops working. Obviously, that's a bad idea, right? And that's a bad thing. I think we've kind of like seen people, the network stuff become a lot more diffused over time. I also think that stuff like Pool can really help as far as like, for example, like, I think Pool can also help someone join the network for the first time. They're able to, both sell channels out to other individuals to make sure that they're actually well connected. But at the same time, also like, get the new inbound advantage to themselves as well too. So that's once again back to like the bootstrapping problem itself. I think as long as people are able to bootstrap pretty easily to the network itself, I don't think we have an issue as far as the whole hub and spoke thing. But I think what we'll have and what we're seeing right now is kind of like, the version of like what's effectively become like the backbone of the network, and backbone of the network meaning kind of like the individual that a little more well connected, maybe a little bit better capitalized as well too. I think we will kind of like have like rough like tiers of a node in terms of like connectivity, capital, uptime, things like that as well too. And so I think as long as we have that grid, and that's how it is, that's fine. But like I think naturally like it won't be like super flat. There'll be some nodes that have more connections. Maybe they'll have better uptime. Maybe they have like exclusive channels to an exchange or whatever else. So I think right now we're pretty good position as far as the resilience of the network. I think we obviously want to increase over time, just to make sure people can like join the network easily and have like a low barrier to entry if actually join the network.
I guess the way that the network has kind of like played out, is it what you expected when you started, building this network? I mean, obviously you've
Mm-hmm.
been here since ground zero.
Mm-hmm.
How do you
Mm-hmm.
feel about the evolution?
Good question. So I guess like I think in my mind maybe like 2 or 3 years ago I thought like we would have something like Pool a lot sooner. But I think even in the face of like something like not having that as early as I anticipated, I still think it's like going at a fairly good pace. I think one thing we're seeing as well, like people can also try to like specialize as far as like what channels they have. They also do channel policies and also like who they're connected to themselves. Because I think it's another thing where it's like you may not really have like a fully generalized network. Maybe we have like certain clusters where like activity is a little bit more pertinent. For example, let's say I'm a writing that I want to like only to micro payments, right? Maybe I have like a very like low max HLC setting. basically I would effectively like tune my channel policy to basically accommodate micropayments rather than like over payments themselves. I think we'll have kind of like special. For example, if I have like a one boat channel of like 100 BTC, do I really need to be sending like 2 satoshis across the channel? Maybe not. Maybe I'll have like other specialized channels like a little bit more specific for that particular use case, and that maybe will have me be a lot more attractive for what's going on there too. So I think it's definitely like flowing as far as I anticipated. I think one thing we did earlier on, which was pretty good, we kind of had our version like autopilot, which is like super basic back then, but I think it actually helped shape the topology network pretty considerably, because back then it was basically something called like preferential attachments, kind of like increase the probability of you connecting out to other nodes, kind of like trying to like them to have like more connections, basically create kind of like scale free topology. Basically ensure we kind of like have like a fairly low kind of like dam rate the entire graph. I think us doing that early on like helped out. I think right now like we kind of like maybe if people are kind of like overlived or like they've outgrown that kind of like heuristic as far as like just preferred test itself. So right now we also have like additional heuristics that focus on kind of centrality. So basically you're trying to position your node such that like between centrality, trying to position your node such that it's basically on like more of the aperture's path of the network itself. Basically put yourself in the aperture's position. So I think those things are going fairly well right now. Obviously the other thing we can't really track as well is something we're doing back end, also kind of like private channels themselves. So anytime people see like these counts of like channels on like websites or whatever else, those are only private channels. I mean, so those are only public channels. Basically channels are kind of like advertised for routing, but I think we're seeing a lot of actual mobile uptake. We have like people really like Breeze that have really good non-custodial experience. Phoenix, Zap, all these other wallets as well too. And so all those people coming on Slide themselves aren't even being shown all these stats. So I think people understand like anytime you see like something that's maybe a channel size or even capacity, that's effectively kind of like a lower bound, and there could be even like double that amount of like actual private channels that's going on right now too. But I think if you don't really see like what it's kind of like the iceberg thing. You only see kind of like the iceberg. There's a lot more below there. And one of the things as well, certain companies are even starting to themselves actually make private channels like other different routers themselves, because at that point it's a little bit more kind of like a private it's like a private like road in a sense. Like I have like a road directly to refill basically, because we do a bunch of transactions together. And one thing like if we make that private, that also means that people won't be routing across it themselves. This means that we can actually have a liquidity be more allocated to what we're doing on the basis.
Really interesting about the specialization of nodes and the purposes, and I mean it makes complete sense. I also am bullish on private nodes and all of these little mobile nodes, like just plugging in and not Lightning is not a blockchain. I feel like I have to tell that to altcoiners a lot, but it's just not a blockchain, so you can't audit the whole thing like that. We have a bunch of questions in the queue from the chat. The first is from Billy too. He's asking, he's not very patient for Lightning on exchanges, and he's asking, why is it taking so long for exchanges to adopt Lightning?
Good question. Yeah, I think for one thing, like I think we spent a bunch of time in the past like meeting with change, but I think we kind of I realized like it's gonna take them a little bit longer, because obviously I think like changes typically they want to like add more coins, right? And that's kind of like really like actually prefer the bottom line. So they want to add all the new tokens, they want to add like all the different things as well. So I think this maybe takes a little backseat. But I think if we're seeing kind of like higher activity on change fees in general, that maybe kind of like force them to be act a little more soonly or more quickly as far as going on. I think now like there's a number of changes. For example, like I guess the biggest one we have today is like Bitfinex. I think Bitstamp has a node, but they don't use it for withdrawals and deposits. I think River also has some things enabled as well too. I think I would anticipate them being a little bit slower. I think also many chains were waiting on like Wumbo in general, because they didn't want to only have $1,000 channel. Maybe they need $100,000 channel referrals. I think now that's there. That's obviously kind of like a big barrier that's been removed. Another thing as well, like I think many chains will also kind of like wanted to like have like very good guides for integration to like manage their hot wallet keys, things like that as well too. So we've been talking about the changes, like kind of giving them also kind of like best practices as far as like how this be going on. So I would say we'll probably see a few more changes come on. I think early next year basically, as they're getting ready themselves. They mentioned other things. I think they also realize now that Lightning itself is growing a lot more. They have things like Pool as well. They can actually use Pool. They don't actually cheap their own capital, and or even boost up their own node to make sure they have like a good connectivity. So I think it's definitely like a little bit. I think we'll probably see a lot more coming on, and I think some of the big names people maybe are thinking of or working on in the background as well. And I do we'll see that early next year as they start to come online.
Are you seeing evidence that traders want to use Lightning?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, obviously, like the Bitcoin chain, I think one thing we see every time like the price goes up is like we have obviously kind of like have like men who being clogged because we would want the deposit whatever else. So obviously, if imagine like if all the chains kind of had like a large part of background channel between all of them, like basically do arbitrage for free in that sense. Another thing we've seen kind of like something Ellen Marcus is effectively I think it's hooked up to like Finex, basically let people kind of trade in their order book. A lot of people actually use that, and like volume that can be going up fairly high. So I think people want it because I think mainly they want the speed, right? They see okay, well I can like move my coins around and in like 100 milliseconds or like 2 seconds or whatever else, that's way better than like 10 minutes or like unbounded if my fee is too long the actual chain itself too. Which I think is one of the things where like people working on like the tooling. I think the wallets have gotten a lot better in the past year or so. Like now like they have a bunch of really cool things as far as like onboarding UX to making sure you can receive things like that as well too. So I think traders will like it, and when they realize they can basically save on like fees and then also just like time of moving things in and out, and that's obviously going to take all the big things to get together, kind of have like their own like effectively like private backbone. Maybe won't actually be necessarily like advertised on the network itself, but just use their own transfers between each other. So yeah. And I think another thing is, well, I think once people start to get on board Lightning the first time, I mean, so I think that like once again, Pool really helps with the onboarding in this case because for example, like right now, like using Pool, like maybe once you've been thing called secondary channels, I can basically like effectively withdraw from an exchange directly into a channel. Right, so this is a little bit so like so let's say I have no Bitcoin at all, I have no I have no channels, I'm not Lightning, whatever else. I can like deposit fiat in the exchange. I can then ask them to basically, assuming they're on Pool properly, they have to withdraw from the exchange directly to a channel, right? And the other thing is, the channel would effectively be connected to kind of like a well-connected node, or maybe has like a high boss or whatever else that actually allows me to connect the easily. So I think with that itself alone kind of like allows them to see like a different way to actually get on people onto Lightning. Also like just improves onboarding in general as well too, because at that point someone can basically be onboarded directly into layer 2, whereas right now that is really costly. I have to go through a bunch of steps, like it's complicated through wallets, or I have high balances, blah blah blah. This simplifies things a lot.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, I think Strike kind of tried to do this, but obviously for big time traders, they're going to need an exchange with a lot more liquidity, and being able to go from fiat straight onto Lightning Network, I can imagine is really good for Lightning Network liquidity. Let's talk a little bit about like some of like the things that people don't know about the Lightning Network, right? Like there's a lot of interesting, weird, things that are enabled by the Lightning Network. Maybe they're enabled in the future Lightning Network, maybe they're enabled right now. But can you talk about maybe just some things that are less known about when it comes to Lightning Network and its properties?
Good question. I think definitely one of the most underused features, maybe like when we should have better. It's kind of like just like TLBs in general. As far as like when I say TLB, I basically like whenever you send a payment over Lightning, it's kind of like in like what's like a packet, like an HLC packet itself, which is like encrypted. But now like one thing we did, basically add kind of like arbitrary message pairs, like key value pairs in the actual TLB itself. So for example, let's say I want to like deposit an exchange, I can basically like have like a push payment effectively using like AMP or whatever else. And like in the TLB, let's say I have like my account ID. So now you can say, okay, I have a message, like let me unpack it, let me get the payment. The account ID, so I would now credit like Laolu's account on whatever exchange I'm on, right? So I think it has a bunch of other cool things. For example, lets you kind of like effectively do like offline payments in a sense as well, in terms of like actually being able to communicate the premiums properly. Just lets you do a bunch of things. Like for example, like people could effectively have like what's like a Lightning native like API in a sense. Like for example, like let's like I wanted to like translate like a text from Chinese or whatever. I can basically like have like my payment sent over to the other party, and then in the TLB maybe I have like what API call I want to hit, and then I also have like the actual payload itself. Then I can send that over to them. And using that, they can like either communicate in contact, maybe using like a payment or a cancel. So you can kind of like have like more channeling of like data. The data itself is still fairly small, which is good. You don't really have like up to like maybe like a kilobyte or whatever else in the actual packet itself. But I think it has a bunch of other cool different ways they can use it in general. I think another thing which I'm excited about itself in general, which I think is a little bit underused right now, is like LSAT in general. Basically LSAT is something we call, it's basically like Lightning Super Authentication. It's a way to kind of like actually have like authentication and or payments on the network itself. So for example, like rather than like me like signing up for once, I can basically like pay them a small amount and get like a token itself, and then like using my like Chrome extension or whatever else, my wallet, I can communicate with them, and then like do it over time. That and for example, like someone could imagine like maybe I have like a game, like maybe the game has a skin, I can basically pay for the skin. It's an LSAT, and I present the game server itself, and then even from there on, you can actually kind of like do something. It's similar to kind of like eCash, where basically the game server can help facilitate transfers to other people. I can basically like sell you my like limited edition skin over to over to yourself, and like obviously we don't really need blockchain for this because like the blockchain effectively the game provider's database at that point. So you can kind of have some like the benefits of doing that with actually having like a bunch of like other different coordination things going around on that edge as well.
That's very cool, and I think some of that is in line with what RGB is trying to enable, as well as like having like a token standard and stuff like that, and being able to issue tether on it and other things like that. Do you have any comments about RGB and how that kind of fits into this kind of communication of value and things?
Yeah, no,
Oh,
I definitely think it's really cool as a concept, kind of like, so I guess the one thing as well is like, I feel like people haven't really made color coins on Bitcoin work other than Tether in the past. Maybe this is like the big thing and like it's really people care about in general. So I guess I haven't really followed like too close like their specs and like current progress, but they seem to kind of like moving forward in general. And obviously the thing that'd be a really cool thing because that's like more use cases. People can do other things on Lightning itself. Maybe they can have like, their own like custom token. Maybe they can have like a USD channel or whatever else. So, but I think whenever they're ready to like, do like bigger integration, like testing, we'll definitely, be happy to take a look at it and see exactly like how can we integrate into Lightning itself. And then maybe what needs to happen in the protocol. But it's not like my main focus right now. But I see like I think the cool thing about Lightning is that we have like several different teams. Each of those teams basically focus on like particular thing they really care about as well. I think that's cool that like, they don't need to ask me permission to like make RGB, and they're doing it themselves, which is really cool. And like whenever it's ready, I'll definitely take a look at it and see how we start integrated and things like that. So.
awesome. Great answer. And yeah, that's my favorite thing about Bitcoin too, is that you can't stop someone from using Bitcoin wrong. You can't stop someone from doing whatever they want with it. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
permissionless software. All right, we have a bunch of questions in the chat, so I'm going to try to get
Okay.
to them.
All right.
Brian Harrington again, who's a big advocate of the P2P economy. He asked,
Mm-hmm.
"Are you bullish on commerce for Bitcoin? Do you
Mm-hmm.
think that the network will be able to compete with credit card payments and other forms of centralized payment networks?"
Yeah, good question. I say maybe not Bitcoin directly, but I think channels and like Lightning as a whole can definitely help like it be a lot more competitive. But I also think it probably depends entirely like where you are in the world as well too. For example, like people in like New Jersey probably have pretty good credit card infrastructure, but like maybe in other parts of the world, maybe like they wouldn't really be able to get them on as easily. I think obviously the big thing with like Lightning in general, that like if an individual can like be onboarded maybe using like a sidecar channel or whatever else, they're able to kind of like they have like much lower barriers of entry to actually join the network in general. For example, like there's no like they don't need to have their credit score check. For example, with the credit card, they can actually join the network because it's actually fully collateralized. So I think we definitely have a lot of the pieces in place. I think it's mostly about now kind of like targeting like particular like location that maybe like have like a more dire need compared to like other locations that maybe like have like very easy access. So I think because that's like a much lower barrier to entry itself, decentralized by nature. I think it already have like a bunch of like competitive advantages over a traditional credit card. I think obviously like the fees for the merchants are a lot lower. They're also not going to pay to receive each individual payment necessarily. They're doing it by themselves. I think the big thing obviously like because like the way it is, you can kind of like have like a pop-up store. Like if I'm like in Brazil and Nigeria, I can basically use BTC Pay. I have a web server on Boom already. Instantly I can basically set payments and I can go from there. So I think that has like a really big advantage compared to credit card because like that's obviously like there's gatekeepers there that can even like have like triggers and trip points. I think it has a bunch of different aspects, but it depends obviously on the use case particular of like the location around the world. I think it will definitely affect like where it gets adopted first. I think we're seeing a lot of like things happen now that I think like I thought would take a long time. Like I think 2020, I was like, yo, like things are moving in the world. Like I gotta like update, like my own like prognosis, like what's happening to happen. So, so I think things are definitely like picked up, and maybe we'll continue to do so in the next decade or so, just because the world is like very dynamic, right now you could say.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think there's a quote, and I'm going to misquote it, but it's like, a year happens in 10 years, and then 10 years happen in a year, something like that.
Oh
But
yeah,
that's what 2020
Bitcoin
feels
time is
like.
crazy. Yeah, I think people were asking me like like I asked a question in the past like how long is it gonna be like the longest lease on like Lightning or like I'm sorry on Pool in general? And I was like 6 months maybe, but 6 months of like is like 5 years in Bitcoin time, right? So it's like one of those things. So I think maybe we'll see that reflected like the rate of lease as well. Like like exactly what the opportunity cost of the capital in Bitcoin. But also like how willing are people to like part with their Bitcoin and that part that I guess be suspended for a period of time just because like maybe at that point you want to move into like cold storage because things happen or whatever else. So I think it's another interesting perspective, kind of like what does like the curve of like I guess time value or occur over time, and maybe there's a particular point where like okay after 7 months it's like okay well I'm not doing anything from that, but definitely interesting aspect of Bitcoin in general.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very nuanced topic and a very nuanced answer, but let's get the not nuanced answer. Yes or no,
Uh
bullish on commerce with
huh.
Bitcoin?
Is this how you're gonna get me? Trying to get me with a quote?
Dude, yeah, I
Yes.
want a yes or no.
All right,
Yes. All right,
let's
there
go
you go,
yes
Brian.
asterisk, and asterisk has like a 5 paragraph response that I just
Yeah. But, but overall bullish, and it's just the permissionless nature. I think again, like we touched on it, I think that's the
Mhm.
advantage.
Oh,
All right,
definitely.
we have Devinox here, and they're asking, can you walk through just like an example transaction from exchange to pool? And I think you
Mm-hmm.
kind of talked about it a little bit, how someone
Mm-hmm.
could buy a bunch of Bitcoin on an exchange and go straight
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
from pool to their own node. But I
Mm-hmm.
guess they want you to go a little bit deeper. Can you just kind of talk about like what are the step-by-step ways that let's just say a user wanting to go from fiat into a lightning channel,
Mm-hmm.
how would they use pool?
Okay, and I guess referring back to that example that I had earlier about exchanges, like the sidecar channel concept itself, or
Yeah, but you can make it more generalized than that.
okay, I guess I'll focus on that one. So I think it's kind of like an interesting, like maybe like a little bit under-recognized aspect of itself. So I guess first, like and when I say sidecar channel, I basically mean the ability for like let's say we have like Alice, Bob, and Carol. It's ability for like Alice to buy a channel for Carol using Bob's funds, on whatever market that we have basically, right? And this is really cool because all of a sudden, like Carol, we're seeing basically has no Bitcoin and has no Lightning Network at all. They're able to actually get on board to the network effectively, with no cost themselves. Maybe they'll pay back, maybe it's like a loan or something like that. Maybe they'll pay back, Alice. Maybe it's like, okay, well I got dinner, like I'll give you this channel, whatever else. But like, I guess specifically the example from the exchange, like I guess it would look something like this. Like, so I'm assuming that the exchange already on Lightning Pool itself, and also Bob is like a liquidity provider because he has a bunch of Bitcoin, wants like earn money after itself. Like, so I go into the exchange, I deposit my fiat, 3 days, whatever else, how long it's going to take, something, wire transfer. Now I have like balance on. So then I mark up a Bitcoin because I want to get a little more increasingly. Then like let's say I go to kind of like a withdrawal, and rather than like withdraw for like Bitcoin Lightning, I say like withdraw like into channel, quote unquote, and then maybe like it has like a additional fee or something like that because I'm getting directly into a channel. But it's also like kind of like it could be free. Maybe the change makes it free or whatever else. Now at this point, like the exchange is on pool. What happens like the exchange puts in a buy order, but it has like a special buy order. Basically flags as like a sidecar channel. One other thing about sidecar channels themselves is that like the channel can actually set out like being like 50-50, so you can receive and send over the same channel as well. So like obviously I'm gonna get like the Bitcoin I bought as sender capacity, but maybe I'll also have receive capacity as much for the change order else. So now like Bob, Alice and Bob basically match like you because like they have sell and bid order. Now in this case, like Bob opens a channel. Like when he opens a channel, he actually does a push amount, and push amount basically is now like me getting that Bitcoin that I bought as like I have my capacity. And so now my channel basically has, let's say I bought one Bitcoin, so I have like two BTC in the channel. I can receive and send up to one BTC at the same time. Everything else goes on as normal. So now at this point, now like I'm like Carol, I have a channel from Bob. Let's say Bob is like one of the top like 5% randomness or else I have like really good connectivity. All of a sudden now within that confirmation or block, I can then even start to use channels from there.
So yeah, I think that was a fantastic example. Devinox, you can answer in the chat if that addressed what you were going for. Dan Ball in the chat is asking, is there anything in particular that you're excited about from Cynthia Loomis, who is the representative or the senator from who is just elected from Wyoming, who's very pro Bitcoin and has been very outward about Bitcoin being a positive thing. I don't know. Have you been following that story? And do you have any
I've seen
thoughts?
it. I've seen it. I guess I've seen it, but I guess like maybe it doesn't affect me directly because like, I live in California and it's like a Wyoming thing, just for like a localism,
It
type
is a
perspective.
senator, though.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, definitely the center. So I think it's definitely a good thing. It's probably going to take more than one to have like a meaningful impact generally. But obviously, if she's able to evangelize, like at least we kind of like have someone in that position that's at least aware of what's going on. I think as well, like people. I think eventually people will have to like learn about because you can say she's very ahead of the curve compared to like other senators who basically don't even know how Facebook works or something like that, right? So like she's very ahead of the curve. I think generally like positive aspect. Exactly what will come of it, I'm not really sure, but I think also like probably like friends with people in Wyoming, like Kate Wong, and also like Kendra, like doing with the band as well too. But it definitely seems maybe like Wyoming becomes like the new hotspot as far as maybe people are able to get bank accounts a lot more easily. So maybe that could even like work really well for their state in general, as far as tracking more Bitcoin entrepreneurs, maybe a little bit more amenable to like people doing things a little bit more cutting edge technologically and also in the finance and things.
So let's talk about some of the challenges that Lightning is going to face. Obviously, you guys have had to deal with a fair amount of critical bugs that you've been able to disclose responsibly and overcome without, bringing down the network. Again, there's a lot of FUD out there and a lot of challenges for the Lightning Network. What do you think is the biggest challenge?
Really good question. So I think one challenge kind of like just making sure we have like an ongoing, like strong, like core network itself. So obviously, like the network's only as strong as like the nodes that are actually operating it. And otherwise, if the nodes go away, maybe they would have an incentive. Gotta make sure that that's helped like fairly strengthened. I think another thing is that like I think I think we made a lot of progress as far as like UX and like end walls. I think we definitely have like a little bit to go more still. I think like, many of the end user walls like like Breeze right now, able to like send and receive pretty instantly. They can like give you a channel. They can recommend channels and things like that. So I think definitely like we have like pretty good brand on that. I think other things like a different thing is one thing we've been doing as far as like kind of like hardening the network a little bit more as far as like getting ready for like more DOS or like different things people can do like playing different games or channels or whatever else. Also kind of like I think also making sure that like the channels can themselves also like evolve over time to kind of like encompass new technology as it comes along. So like, the whole thing I'm working on for network equipment, which we're going to upgrade individuals. For example, like right now, like I think most people like have basically because like the first channel itself like was like the DJ channel like has some like things like for example like didn't really support SCB, the complex recovery mechanism that well, and it has a bunch of issues. So I think if we're able to kind of like if this thing does work and we're able to effectively like upgrade all all the channels of the network, like in a decentralized manner off chain, I think that'd be a really big thing because all of a sudden now you can basically upgrade a channel on the fly. So anytime you have like a bug fix, maybe kind of like more like fundamental on the script, or maybe you have a different like a particular use case. Something for example, we can actually do that, in a more automatic manner and actually in a way that people don't need to upgrade all at once, kind of the whole software type of thing. So I think those are three things definitely on my mind as far as the challenges. But I think everything obviously like to make sure we can like as people getting more money into networks, make sure we can like have additional more effective ways to basically manage your balance. Maybe have like some like type of like hybrid cold storage thing. Maybe there's like different signers. I mean, definitely a lot of work to kind of like making sure the signing infrastructure allows for kind of like larger channels to basically make sure people don't feel like they're exposing themselves with a direct hot wallet in the network itself. So a bunch of things like for hardware integration we can work on there.
So someone in the chat is asking about Bitcoin D. Obviously, Lightning leverages the Bitcoin. It's the Bitcoin D,
BTCD.
and I think BTCD as well as the Golang implementation of Bitcoin. I guess, how do you guys feel about supporting Bitcoin clients and kind of giving back to the code that is the foundation of Lightning?
Good question. Yeah, I mean, so I definitely think BTD, like kind of like the Go implementation of Bitcoin is like a really big deal in general. Because I think it was actually one of the ways I actually like learned Bitcoin in general. Because like initially, like I was like looking to like, get the code base or whatever else. Like I saw the Bitcoin D code base. I think back then, like wasn't as good as it is right now. I think it saw some good ways, but it wasn't like very like inviting in terms of like the actual way it was laid out and like SQL things like that as well too. But I found BTD also because the way kind of like it follows like a more like kind of like quote unquote like literate programming type structure. It's like a lot of complex documentation. I'm like very very successful because I think the one thing is like you can read about like how like transaction verification works or like maybe like things like block values or else. I think at least being a programmer, unless you're able to like read that at the programming level and part of the code, I think once you read the code, it becomes a lot more clear what's going on. So I think it's basically like definitely super important as far as like I like more implementations, diversity. I think the other thing as well is like specialization. I think like I don't think Bitcoin D can grow to basically like accommodate all the needs of all the different various users. I think right now the user base is like fairly like large. I think at times like maybe like they get a little bit flack for like not doing things that are super innovative, but I think they're going to focus more on stability. Maybe like the wallet, maybe like the two biggest things what's going on there. But for example, I think people can actually have like a lot more freedom as far as flexibility. Maybe have like RPC systems, maybe focus on different types of sync, whatever else. If they work on other things, I think the other things well, I think I could be wrong with. I feel like a project can only grow so large. I think for software engineering, once you come and calculate like some of the social aspects as well too, where like people may split from Bitcoin D because they have some random beef, and I think that's okay because of the other thing. But I think it's hard to kind of like have there can only be one from kind of like coordination scaling perspective, right? Because it's like okay, why did my peer get more else? I think BTC is really important. I think obviously the hard thing about like having another opportunity to compete with Bitcoin D is that like Bitcoin D has a lot more funding from people like being so for example whenever people talk about like funding a Bitcoin developer, I think Coinbase is doing that right now. Like they typically talk about them working on Bitcoin D directly, not even like Bitcoin as a whole. Even there's a bunch of things going on there too. I think there's a lot of that. I think it's difficult to like have one up because otherwise you basically need some level of kind of like people that handle and like funding whatever. I think it's still going like we at Lightning Labs we contribute. So, I mean people can contribute to either one. Like I myself contribute to BTC, like and also because like many of the libraries that we actually have were basically made off of BTC Suite. BTC Suite is basically kind of like the general Bitcoin library that BTC is based off of. So LND wouldn't really exist without those set of libraries as well. Maybe we would have chosen another language or something like that. So I think it's definitely like so I think I'd say they have the best libraries of Bitcoin in general that fairly well maintained, has a good documentation, things like that. So I think from a tooling perspective, it's extremely important. But obviously the node battle is like another uphill thing, just because there's much less people, there's less prestige, there's less money, so there's a bunch of different factors going into like why do people pick particular projects to get it on in the first place.
Are you optimistic that companies like Lightning, that companies like Square, Blockstream will just continue to kind of propagate and, in their own way, contribute back to the different aspects of the Bitcoin code base that they rely on? Is that a trend that you think is going to continue?
I think so. And I think people are also kind of like learning. I mean, I think it's kind of like a very like fundamental thing where it's for example, like if we're like using a bunch of like Kubernetes or whatever else, like other campus, they're probably like contributing to more directly because maybe they have an interest that needs to be heard. I think it's kind of like a natural thing, and I think it'll definitely go forward more and more. Obviously it's kind of like a balance because some campus maybe like have a little bit more product focus or versus open source or whatever else. But yes, I think it's definitely like a really good trend going forward. I do think we can keep up people like doing grants in general, kind of like doing more funding and seeing. I think the things are like there are other things you can work on and or contribute rather than like just contributing to Bitcoin D itself because like Bitcoin itself has so many other problems, a bunch of interesting things at the wallet level, script, general tooling, documentation, a bunch of other things people can contribute in versus just like that one code base, even though definitely rock solid and super reliable. But yeah.
So we have someone asking, is there a way to check up on pool stats without actually running a Lightning node or running Lightning pool?
Yes. Yeah, I recommend you run pool because you get the raw stats, versus another side. Like, yeah, so I think people were working on like kind of like other visualization. So like there's something called like I think Twitter.com has Lightning Pool. Someone like made a bot. They were kind of like part of like kind of an early testing program. It basically, I think every single batch they tweet out like what the clearing rate was, and also like how many the amount of like volume through the system itself. If you follow that bot, it also has like some basic graphs as well. And like one thing we're working on, like something like pool will also eventually be integrated into Lightning Terminal. So basically, how kind of like have like graphs, big like mandatories or accounts like that as well too. But typically we kind of like like to just on the CLI first, because it's a little more raw. We get like a lot more direct feedback as far as what's going on. Eventually, we have like the UI once we actually go to the next level of like adoption of people going on right now. But obviously, it's still a little bit early. People are using it right now, but it's going to like evolve a lot. It's what we call it alpha. Maybe we'll have to break API changes, things like that. But yeah, what's the average price we're getting right now? I think it's been hovering around like 992 or 1488, fixed rate, which I guess in API is like 5 to 10%, or a year. But I think one thing is people like acknowledge well is that like API doesn't really exist. So actually, the system itself doesn't do like annual interest rate. It basically has like a per block interest rate. Basically, every single block people basically accruing interest because like that's kind of the time the scripts actually understand. So like right now we basically have like a 2016 duration. Basically like this is like you're buying leasing a channel for 2016 weeks. So or sorry for 2 weeks. So anytime you see something like, maybe like have like an APY quote, they're actually extrapolating from a 2-week interest rate to a 1-year interest rate, which is like fairly like long gap. So it may not necessarily just be times 26 or whatever, right? So maybe like, and I think the other thing is like, I think once we add additional kind of like durations, maybe like we'll have like a different effects as far as like the difference between like the long and the short term interest rate. Maybe it won't just be exactly like linear separation. Maybe it'll be like more than that, or maybe things will be flipped as well. So it's still pretty early, and like right now it's only like a 2-week period. But I think right now you can still extrapolate and see what's going on here. I think the other thing is well, like obviously like we're only 2 weeks into the actual open marketplace in general. So I would assume like maybe we'll even have a lot more price discovery. Maybe the price even goes down a little bit further because maybe we have like a lot more supply in there right now. But I think people are definitely excited about it, and even just in the 2 weeks, I think we've had almost like 10 BTC or so change in channels so far, which is pretty good.
Yeah, that's really exciting. So we have less than 10 minutes here, and I want to make sure that we can kind of pick your brain on Taproot.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Taproot is the kind of like the next big soft fork that is being considered for Bitcoin main chain, and there are implications for Lightning and what Lightning can do and what can be done with DLCs and a lot of other things like that that have a lot of developers really excited. But obviously, you don't want to count your eggs too soon. I
Mm-hmm.
guess things are looking pretty positive. Do you think about Taproot? Do you think about what it enables and how it affects what you're building?
Yeah, I think about it. I guess I think more about like the things that are going to come after, or the things that I'd like to come after. Because I guess like for me myself, I kind of like view Taproot itself as more of like a meta upgrade as far as like what it enables. So I think obviously like snoring things like that are cool, but I think it has a bunch of things like as far as enable like different ways of doing software in general, different ways of doing multi-sig. Kind of like the more extension structures as far as like adding more things to Bitcoin with like the way that we have the internal version and the Merkle itself. I'm really excited about kind of like all the accessibility that it adds in general, just to allow things in the future itself. I think one thing is why I kind of like caution people kind of like so I think Taproot will kind of like have like a much longer update cycle than like Segwit is actually, right? Because like I think people typically like shamed exchange were also not having Segwit with like 2-3 years, but I think Taproot's gonna take even longer just because like it may not directly affect them. I think the other thing as well like from perspective like the wallet, it actually has like a lot more changes. Because maybe like maybe with Segwit basically had to do like a SIG flag, but in this case you basically have to like have a new signature, new SIG flag, the Merkle priest, whatever else. I think it's all really cool stuff. But I think people should be a little bit measured as far as like how long it'll actually be uptaken. I think Lightning will obviously like use it almost like once it's as soon as out basically we have a bunch of different cool use cases for it itself. I think it's a little bit more of like kind of like a meta, Bitcoin script design type of thing, rather than like have like a bunch of like very like valuable end user updates for the individual. So it may take a little bit longer. In general, I'm super bullish about it. Like I would say that like I feel like people like kind of have like PTSD from like the past like 3 years ago, and that like I feel like they were kind of like very nervous about like approaching the update, like talking about it, do talk to miners, blah blah blah. But I guess in my mind, I feel like there was a fissure that happened. I think so now like the individuals that left are basically individuals that were willing to actually coordinate with everyone else because now we see Bcash like forked again, then 3 other times else. I think people that are left are like a little bit more willing to actually coordinate to like what they think actually matters, and also in the sense that like I think Taproot itself like it's just more like a meta upgrade. There's no like really big thing, like it doesn't really seem that controversial at this point either. But I think it's kind of like a matter of like time. I think people also want to make sure like they do the thing properly to like have things move forward. But I guess if it was just me, I'd say like if we could do the whole soft fork every 6 month thing, that'd be super dope because I have like a massive list of things I think should happen in general. But no, I think I'm super excited about it. Like in general, obviously like the main thing I'm really excited about is things like just like source signatures in general, for example like cross input signature aggregation. Like you can have like, a bunch of things, for example like what we're doing on Loop. I think it's just like a big tool in general people can be using to like do other things as well. And like for example, like the shadow chain stuff could really benefit from other things that in Taproot and the covenants in general as well too. So yeah.
So I'm kind of ignorant, but does
Mhm.
Schnorr and Taproot enable L2? And if yes, can you jump into that a little bit?
No, because L2 needs L2 like the golden version needs something called no input basically to kind of like allow you to have like lot more flexible say aspects. So I guess I would say I'm more excited about that than some of the immediate things in Taproot because I think that's something where it's like I'm more excited about things that can come after it. And ideally, if assuming everything goes well, we can like possibly have other upgrades be rolled out like no input, which is like I talked about that like 5 years ago. I've had implementation for a very long time. I think people realize like it's a good thing. I think people kind of like were very cautious like rightfully as far as like introducing something that could have certain kind of like negative aspects as far as people like double spend or whatever else. So I think it's a really cool thing to get in. But technically technically you can do L2 today, where you basically just have a lot more state lying around, right? Because I think one of the things where it's like for example, like stuff like check log time, verify helps out. You could do without it, but you have a lot more state or like precise signatures. But obviously, if you want to have a simple version of something possible, you definitely want to go in that direction. But yeah, so L2 requires other stuff, but it can be done today in kind of like a lesser version possibly.
Okay, so gonna end with one last question and then let you kind of point people to where they can find you and other Lightning resources.
Yep.
But someone is asking about earning yield on their BTC. They're saying that they're earning 6% yield on a place that rehypothecates their Bitcoin, and
Mm-hmm.
they're curious if Lightning will ever get to the point where it's kind of offering competitive yield. I think on top of that, you can add on like what a Boss score is. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's named after your colleague Alex Bosworth,
Mm-hmm.
and he recently published some interesting numbers about being able to accrue quite a bit of fees with
Mm-hmm.
his node. So I guess
Mm-hmm.
that's a multifaceted question. So I'll just let you
Mm-hmm.
dive in.
Sure. I guess the question, the response is like it depends. I'm not gonna promise. I'm not gonna promise like 5,000 API, like something like depending or whatever else. So like maybe like I'm not really sure because I think that things are like the market's still very young. Like the current rate may not last. Maybe it gets down a lot lower because, for example, it is kind of like a lower risk thing technically than like some other thing itself. So the person have like a lower yield as a result. I think the other things were like in that like so I think it depends also kind of like router operator because like I was saying before like not all like routers are created equal and like Alex for example like probably spends way more time with his node than anyone else in the chat or on Twitter or else, right? It's like he could be spending a few hours like a week basically like tending to his node where everyone's just kind of like the gets everything. I think people need to understand like it's not enough to basically have your node up there. You need like monitor it, like look at your channels, use things like RTL and Thunderhub or whatever else like actually maintain your node properly. So that's definitely gonna take a little bit of time. And I guess the other question you asked about like Bosco. So like in something we developed like initially for like kind of like our end user applications, I think it's kind of like a way to like rank nodes. So, like I was saying before, not all nodes are created equal, right? So we were trying to like at least try to like have the good nodes from the bad nodes, like good nodes from bad nodes, like go like more like minor perspective. But if you look at number thing, looks at like channel uptime, looks at age, looks at another thing does a lot of like active probing. Because for example, like a node can look good on paper, so like like you have like 100 connections, have to be two overall. Maybe actually have the net channel are really being managed effectively. So like one thing that definitely weighs a lot more heavily to kind of like active probing itself. So I think that's what people maybe see people like kind of like drop from the list occasionally, like maybe like I was on the list, I'm on or those because like it's fairly kind of dynamic thing. Obviously, one thing we're working on our end, like people definitely ask a lot more kind of like feedback as far as like what's going on, how does it work, how do I generate my score, how do I improve. So we're definitely working on a lot of things basically, be a lot more transparent like what's going into it, let people kind of query the score a lot more easily, and then even possibly eventually give you kind of like a like feedback basis, like okay, you got like a B minus, maybe you should work on your uptime and this and this and this. So we kind of like have people a lot more give people a lot more feedback to basically like allow them to actually get their score up because obviously they have a higher score, maybe you can have a lot more network. I guess one other thing I want to mention with like the relationship between bot score and pool. So right now, like people that are on the list like get like orders will default match with them, but it's also possible to basically like, have a bid order that actually doesn't specify that they want to be like on a T1 node, like someone on the score itself. It's one thing we can see as well. Like we could even see that maybe I can like buy a node from like a T like buy 10 like T0 node, but like kind of like a much lower price than T1 node as well too. So I guess it depends on like what you want to do as far as like your risk and also quality. The main idea is basically trying to like ensure that people are actually buying channels that are going to be actually providing a good service, whereas by buying like channels like the 11.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes a lot of sense in it. I mean, there's a lot of gotchas when it comes to, opening up a channel with someone who's not reliable or not a good counterparty. So definitely
Mm-hmm.
seems like it's useful. Lalu, it's been awesome getting to ask you these questions for the last hour. I
Definitely.
can't. It went by really quick, and we talked about a
Yeah,
lot
no,
of different
definitely.
stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you give your last word and then plug yourself for people who are watching and want to learn more about you?
Yeah. So I guess people check out LND. We have a release from LND coming up. Pretty soon in a few weeks here. That's gonna be LND.12. Has a bunch of really cool things. Obviously the release notes are gonna be pretty massive as usual. A bunch of really cool. It's probably gonna be the last update of LND for the year. So you can upgrade and go back to Christmas and be chilling or whatever else. Definitely check out Terminal itself. We're definitely having a lot more release of Terminal as far as adding more things in there as far as Mono support, things like that too, and also be on the lookout for actually Pool being in Terminal soon. Maybe at one point, maybe also looking for maybe some early tests of the UI to make sure we're actually making something a little bit relevant for people actually using Pool as of right now. And obviously, check out Pool as well too. We have a bunch of different docs. If you go to pool.engineering, that's going to give you basically our Git book, which is a bunch of documentation of how it works. High level has a pack things like that as well too. Another thing, I guess, if people think things like Pool or whatever else are cool, we're actually hiring stuff in different positions right now. We're hiring a designer, someone to help us with some business operations, and also like an infrastructure engineer. So it'd be really cool if you think what we're doing is cool on the engineering perspective. Definitely check out our job listings. And obviously we're a remote team. We're remote before it got cool. So we've been doing it for a while. It's not like a new thing to us. So if you're into that kind of lifestyle, working, I'm in that stuff right now, in my room, like like everyone else, on this thing right now. So definitely check out our job listings. Really cool team. I'm just grateful I can work with all these people, and I think we did a really good job actually getting Pool out in general, something I'm working on for a very long time. And yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm friends with several folks on the Lightning Labs team, and I feel honored and blessed. And you guys definitely have stacked quite an awesome cast of Bitcoiners building out the Lightning Network. Laolu, thank you so much for coming on to Bitcoin Magazine AMA. Yeah, excited to report on the newest update and report on what you guys are going to be doing, in the next coming months. And yeah, just feeling bullish on Bitcoin. Hopefully, we can break 17K today. That would be
Yeah,
awesome.
we'll see. Because I'm saying, this is effectively all time high. So but yeah, we'll see what's going on. I'm definitely happy to talk about stuff in the future. Everything else that we have coming on through the rest of the year.
All right, cool. Well, the BTC studio, we will be calling it out to everyone who watched. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for all the questions. And yeah, keep an eye out for all the other amazing content coming out this week. We have a Technical Tuesday tomorrow with the guys from Voltage who are also building some awesome stuff in the Lightning space. So keep that on your calendar. And yeah, keep an eye out for everything else from Bitcoin Magazine. But that's it from
Yeah.
me, guys. Peace.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for watching. See y'all.